Hey guys, ggDoA here, and we've got a new Hearthstone expansion coming out. It's awesome. It's Whispers of the Old Gods, and the Old Gods, if you're not familiar with it, is sort of a very Cthulhu-esque take on forces that were influencing Azeroth for a long, long time ago in the WoW lore. And one of my favorite parts of WoW lore in my last decade of playing World of Warcraft has been kind of the conflict between the Titans and the Old Gods. So I'm hoping that because we've got the Old Gods in this, we're going to have a little bit of the Titans too, but I don't know, we'll have to kind of wait and see if that happens. But I wanted to do a quick review, just get my first impressions of the initial cards that were announced out there. Now, I want to put a disclaimer on this. Big disclaimer that a lot of these opinions that you have early on about seeing these cards are going to be opinions based on missing information, right? Because we don't know what the other cards in the set are going to be. We don't really know how cards in the classic set are going to change, because they said some of those will. So all of these opinions may be either brilliant foresight, or they might be completely invalid depending on what Blizzard decides to do with it. So we're just going to take a look at it, have some fun checking out the new cards, and I thought this would be a really interesting one to start with, the Eater of Secrets. It's a 4-mana 2/4 neutral minion, and it says Battlecry, destroy all enemy secrets, gain +1/+1 for each. Wow. If there was ever a way to shut down Secret Paladin, this is going to be it. This is like the card. And a lot of people may say, oh, this is such a hard counter to something like that. But if you're familiar with CCGs, and my personal experience is mostly with Magic the Gathering, a lot of times sets will have cards that essentially counter or greatly reduce in strength the popular meta decks from earlier sets. And the reason you do this is to either counter things that might be a little bit too strong, or to just kind of keep the meta fresh, keep the game sort of evolving. So I'm actually really, really glad to see a card like this coming out for Hearthstone. The fact that it exists alone is going to actually reduce the amount of Secret Paladins that are out there. It's going to make Hunter decks a little bit more risky to play. My poor Secret Hunter, it barely saw life, but then you've also got to think about Freeze Mages too. I mean, if you're a Freeze Mage, I'd be a little bit worried about this card. You know, we might see one of these teched in here and there, but obviously if the secret decks kind of fall off a little bit, then we're going to see this card fall off as well. But I'm glad to see it in the set. It's going to be interesting. It's going to have a huge impact on some of the popular meta decks right now, and this is the kind of card I want to see. This is I think a good direction for Hearthstone to go. So really cool card to start things off with, Eater of Secrets, and it's a cool looking card too. I love the like creepy, tentacly old god kind of stuff. It's awesome. If you haven't read any H.P. Lovecraft, by the way, go and read it. That's the dude that's behind all the Cthulhu stuff originally, and his short stories are really creepy and awesome. So, completely unrelated to Hearthstone thing, go read H.P. Lovecraft. Let's check out the Giant Sandworm. Alright, this is interesting. 8 mana for an 8/8. If this minion attacks another minion and kills it, it can attack again. So, what we kind of see from this is some late game board control for Hunter, which is an interesting thing to think about, because I think over time a lot of people have tried with, you know, greater and lesser amounts of success to run slower, more control-oriented Hunter decks. I think the possibility is certainly out there. We saw a little bit of Reno Hunter. We've seen it done in the past, but it's never really become really strong in a tournament sense. A card like this, though, that still leaves you 2 mana left over, which is viable for hero powering or, you know, playing another small spell. An 8 mana card like this, I think, could possibly see some play if we start to see some slower Hunter decks, because it can also attack players. It's not like Chilma, where it can only attack minions. It can attack minions and it can attack players. So it's still a big body that needs to be worried about by your opponent, but you know, talk about a huge board clear for a lot of mid-range decks. Now, that said, I think with the current cards that exist right now, the problem still exists for Hunter, that if you run a slower deck, means to keep yourself alive is very important, and your hero power comes into play a lot in that. That's why we see, you know, Priest and Warrior be great control decks, Paladin to a lesser extent, is because their hero power helps you extend the game, essentially. You know, it helps you either stay alive longer or, you know, get more chances to get your late game threats out. And Hunter hero power is by nature just more aggressive. It just deals 2 damage to the enemy champion, doesn't really do anything for you. you can't say, well, at least I'm killing him faster, because if you're playing a slow deck, the objective isn't to kill them fast anyway. Maybe with Finley McGurkleton, that won't be as important. I think Finley is a must-include in any slower control Hunter deck that you're trying out right now. But again, we're going to see what else is going to come out for Hunter and what other neutral cards are coming in this expansion, as well as the changes to the classic cards that we might see. So I like this card. I think, again, it's a really cool concept. Not sure if it's going to really work into any new decks, but I think it certainly could. It certainly could. We'll see. Moving on to Hoarder, the Scourge of Elwin, which seems kind of ironic to me because, I mean, if you played WoW, you know this guy has already been the Scourge of Elwin since, like, day number 1. He didn't need giant purple tentacles on his back to be the Scourge of Elwin. If you were trying to beat this dude, you know he is a Scourge to deal with. But anyway, 7 mana for a 6/6. When this minion is damaged, summon a 2/2 Null with Taunt. So, a little bit of a different take on the current Hoarder that just summons a 2/2 Taunt Null minion at the end of every turn. It's interesting. I mean, there's a couple ways you can look at this card, because efficiency-wise, 7 mana for a 6/6, not terribly appealing. Then again, if Big Game Hunter is still around when Standard comes out, if it's still around when Whispers of the Old Gods is released, then a 6/6 for 7 really isn't so bad, because he's not susceptible to that really easy removal. And that said, you don't need to wait for somebody to run into this minion to get those 2/2s. I mean, we know already from decks like Grim Patron that there's a lot of benefit to damaging your own minions from time to time. So maybe we could see a deck with Hoarder that's based on, hurting him and getting those 2/2 Null minions out there. The tricky part is that you can't, like, slap him into Patron right now, because a lot of that stuff damages every minion on the board, and you don't want to end up giving yourself a bunch of 2/1 taunts. It's not too helpful. So I'm curious about this card. It seems kind of gimmicky. It seems like just sort of a fun legendary to me. However, depending, again, on the cards that come out later in the set, we could see this guy get a lot of use. I mean, he's got a good health pool, so there's a potential that you could get, a good amount of 2/2 taunts. Now, imagine if this guy came out when Warsong Commander was still the old way he was. That would have been pretty interesting. So, Hoarder, the Scourge of Elwin, again, kind of a cool card. I think in general, I'm pretty excited about the cards that have been shown so far for this set. Very neat. Let's move on. We've got the Polluted Hoarder, 4 mana for a 4/2. Death Rattle, draw a card. It's been said before, basically double the Loot Hoarder, except for the draw, pretty much. He's a 4/2 instead of a 2/1. And this is going to be interesting, because cycle is always good. You're always looking to work through the cards in your deck to get the threats out that are really going to be the game-changing threats. And so he's got attack equal to his mana cost. He's got that going for him. 2 health, again, at the point in the game where you're playing 4 mana cards in general, you're going to probably want stuff with more than 2 health, because you're going to want to be establishing a board for the most part that's going to last and be able to deal with multiple threats coming from your opponent. So the health total concerns me a little bit. You could argue that's what it's supposed to be, because it's a double Loot Hoarder essentially. And the fact that he draws a card is always good, so I could see him getting some use. The other thing to think about with this is that Naxxramas and GVG are falling out of the meta, are falling out of Standard. And I should say, too, that when I'm talking about the cards today, I'm going to be talking about them in the sense of my opinion of their viability in the Standard format, more than anything else. So I'm not really going to worry about Wild too much. I'm going to play it because it sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun to put everything in there, but for this kind of video, I'm going to focus most on how I think as far as like Standard, ladder, and tournament viability. So Polluted Hoarder could actually fill some of those spots that are going to be vacated by things like Piloted Shredder that's not going to be available anymore in Standard. So it could see some play. It's going to be interesting to see how people work that into decks. I could see myself trying him out in something like that. It all depends, right? I mean, if you have a deck where you want to put a decent threat on the board, he's got 4 attack, that's a decent threat, and you want to cycle, this seems like a card you'd want to include. So yeah, I could see him seeing some use, but again, the health total makes me worried just a little bit with this one. Let's move on. Stand Against the Darkness, a 5 mana paladin card, summon 5/1/1 Silverhand Recruit. So Muster for Battle is gone, right? Obviously, Quartermaster is gone too, which is kind of interesting. So we need another way to get more dudes, right? I mean, thematically, I feel like Paladin should kind of be this way, that you're as a paladin, you're sort of leading this army of the light, you're sort of the general. I get that impression that that's the theme that they kind of want to go for. I think that's a cool theme. So here we have another card where you just get a lot of Silverhand recruits. Now, obviously 1/1 dudes are easily dealt with, and at turn 5, you put out a bunch of 1/1s. May or may not be great. Again, it depends on the synergies you can build with other cards. You know, right away, the turn following, you've got stuff like Defender of Argus that can be kind of handy with that. And it's essentially 1 more mana for a implosion that always gets max. That gets 1 more than max, actually. And if you think about Zoo Warlock and what you can do with a bunch of 1/1s there, you know, maybe you can kind of find something to do with a bunch of 1/1 Silverhand recruits as well. So, we'll see. I think it's a cool card again, and I think it could see some use. I think it fits thematically the Paladin class, and the fact that this card exists really suggests to me that Blizzard has plans for something you're going to be able to do with those 1/1 Silverhand recruits. I'd be very, very surprised if we didn't see anything that synergizes with this. This is a card that has combo written all over it, so, well, again, like, Knife Juggler right away, you know, but I'm saying there's going to be probably more combo potential within the Whispers of the Old God expansion. That's my prediction. We'll see how right I am, I guess, as more cards get revealed. So let's move on, once again, to the Validated Doomsayer. Ah, yes. A 0/7 at the start of your turn. Set this minion's attack to 7. He costs 5 mana, too. So this is a really neat card. It's very interesting because it essentially slows down the game, right? You've got the potential for a 7/7 to come out on your next turn, right? And this guy is going to be, he's going to be able to attack right away when he becomes that 7/7. Until then, he can act theoretically as 7 armor, because he's certainly a card that demands a response. The tricky part, of course, is that you've got Cabal Shadow Priest coming in and taking this guy away. But then again, I mean, if you think about it in the game already, there are a lot of cards that Cabal Shadow Priest just, like, takes, right? That makes you absolutely miserable. So I'm not really too worried about Cabal Shadow Priest. I think this guy could still be a card that we see in a lot of decks. I think he's certainly a threat that would require a response when he gets played, and it's kind of an interesting mechanic too. You know, it's just something different. It's just something that forces your opponent to think about the game in a different way, and sort of derails their strategy. It's a card a lot like Sylvanas, in that when that card is played on the board, your opponent suddenly needs to rethink their entire game plan, right, from there on out, because they have to worry about that particular card's effect, and they have to worry about it pretty much immediately. And I like cards like that. I like cards that just sort of take the game state and the board state at that point and just sort of shake it up. So I think this is a really cool card. I can't wait to play around with it in some of my decks. As far as competitive viability goes, again, you know, it depends on what responses to this kind of card exist in the set for other classes, for other neutral minions. But just initial impressions, I think it's really good. I think it's a really cool card. Let's go to the next one. So, Corrupted Healbot. This one's kind of interesting. 5 for a 6/6. It is a mech, so it's got all those synergies as well. Death Rattle, restore 8 health to the enemy hero. So, you know, kind of a similar thing to the Zombie Chow. Obviously, you're restoring health to the enemy. Now, the obvious thing right here is, of course, Akanai Soul Priest. Get it out there, get it dead, do 8 damage to your opponent, which sounds really good. However, this thing is a 6/6. It's got 6 health. It's not quite as easy to get rid of as a 2/3 Zombie Chow on your side. So when people are immediately jumping to that synergy, I think that's something really important to consider as well. That if you play this guy, 5 for a 6/6, I mean, mana value, he's great. You know, you get more stats for the mana. But if he dies right away, you might end up healing your opponent for 8. So it's certainly something to worry about. It's going to be a bit of a challenge to find out when to play this guy in relation to Akanai Soul Priest, because, you know, he is a 6/6 body. You want to maybe get some sort of board use out of him too. You don't initially want to throw him away so quickly. I mean, the real question is, you know, are there going to be like big wombo combos, right, where you play like this guy and you do Akanai double Circle of Healing and you've already got like 1 out or something. I'm sure there's some crazy near OTK strategy people will be able to come out with this card, but just in general use, because he's a big body, it's going to be difficult for that 8 health to not actually go to your opponent, for them to not actually get that 8 health as a positive health increase. That said, if he's able to attack face twice, that's 12 damage. If you get healed for 8, that's only a total of 4. So I think personally this guy's use is more along the lines of, again, a card that slows the game down, a card that is able to deal with multiple threats on your opponent's side of the board that are already out. This guy can trade really well with a lot of stuff. He's not susceptible to BGH. And if you're playing a slow control deck, who cares if they get 8 health? A lot of times in the mid game, they're still at 30 anyway. You're not really worried about that at that point in the game. So to me personally, I'm less excited about this guy in terms of crazy Arcanine Soul Priest combo potential as I am in the board control that he's going to give you, in the way that he'll help control priest decks, even control warrior theoretically, have something out on the board that can deal with multiple smaller threats, get a lot of value, and then eventually when it dies, they get 8 health back, but you're playing the long game anyway, so it really doesn't matter in the end. I think that's really where this card, if it's used, is going to see a little bit more viability, if you will. So we'll see. It's an interesting card. I like the cost for stats. I think the value is there, All right. 3-on-1. That's right. I put all 3 of these cards on one page because they're all connected, obviously. You have the Twilight Elder, 3 mana, 3/4. You have the Beckoner of Evil, 2 mana, 2/3. And they both buff Cthun, who of course is the legendary minion that Blizzard will be generously bestowing upon all of us when we open our first pack for Whispers of the Old Gods. And Cthun, of course, is a 10 mana, starts as a 6/6, but his battle cry is deal damage equal to this minion's attack, randomly split among all enemies. So they said on the American Championship stream that in testing it was getting up to high teens, low 20s, and I would believe that. They said there's 16 cards in the set that directly work with Cthun, that directly synergize with Cthun, no matter where he is, your deck, your hand, what have you. So it's really interesting. This is our theme. This is the theme for the Whispers of the Old Gods expansion. Last expansion, it was kind of the jousting theme. Didn't really pan out too great. But this, I think, is really, really cool. And obviously, we're going to see lots of people try to build Cthun decks with, pretty much every class. Now, the interesting thing to consider when you're building a Cthun deck, and again, all we have to see right now are these 2 minions, is that these 2 minions don't exactly give you a tempo advantage, per se. They've got good stats for mana. 2/3 for 2 is good. 3/4 for 3 is good. But they don't really have any battle cries that affect the board state right now. They don't have any death rattles that affect the board state when they go away. They only affect Cthun. They affect the late game. And so you're making it a little bit harder to stay alive and to control the board by essentially playing vanilla minions at this point. So there's going to have to be other stuff in Cthun decks that make up for the lack of initial impact that these cards have when you play them. So that's going to be interesting to see how people sort of work their way around that. And I've got a feeling that some of those other 16 Cthun cards are going to deal with that. But it's something to really consider when you think about the fact that things like Sludge Belcher, some of those survival cards are going to be gone now, that Naxxramas and GVG again are going to be out of standard. So absolutely there's going to be Cthun decks, and I'm reasonably sure that we're going to have at least 1 or 2, maybe 3 viable Cthun-oriented decks. As far as what classes would be best for this, again, that really depends on the other cards that come out in Whispers of the Old Gods. That really depends on what gets changed in the Classic set. So I don't want to really say any class specifically right now, because I think, honestly, we're just going to have to wait and see what's going to, work out. But it's a very, very interesting concept, because obviously, if Cthun gets out, if you survive, he gets out, and he is like 2020, he's going to absolutely wreck the entire board, right? But you do also kind of, and he's going to wreck your opponent too, but you do kind of also run the risk of, if you ever in a situation where he gets discarded, then as far as I know, you're pretty much out of luck with that. But Blizzard has said that if you play Cthun and he gets like sapped or returned to your hand or something, he retains the stat buffs that he got throughout the game, which is really, really interesting, because in that sense, you don't want to send Cthun back, because then he's going to get played again, he's going to do his battle cry again, and that's going to be really, really bad if you're the person playing against Cthun. So you're going to have to kill him in some way. BGH, I guess, probably, but maybe there'll be other ways too. Repentance, if you're a paladin, certainly seems like a pretty good card if Cthulhu's really popular. So there's ways to deal with it. Humility too, but Hunter's Mark, of course. But once he's out, he's already kind of done his damage too. So I feel like if you get to attack with Cthun, that's just kind of icing on the big tentacly corrupted cake, if that is a appealing way to say it. I don't know, it sounds kind of gross, but you get the idea. Cthun, very, very cool stuff. And I think that's it. I think we're going back to the start. Yeah, it is. Okay, so that's all the cards that have been announced so far for Whispers of the Old Gods. Really, really awesome stuff. I'm extremely excited about this expansion. I thought League of the Explorers was a big step in the right direction for Hearthstone. A little bit less randomness overall. Discovery is a much better mechanic to create. You know, a little bit of randomness, but again, mitigated randomness. I think that's the important thing for CCGs in general going forward, is that you want to have exciting random things happen in a game, but you also want to have a way for players to mitigate that if they are good players, and I think League of Explorers went a long way in doing that. I think the move to standard format and wild format goes a really long way in doing that, especially with a lot of the GVG cards, and I think the Whispers of the Old Gods expansion is going to be great in doing that too. So yeah, I'm really, really excited about where Hearthstone's going. The set's going to be awesome. Hopefully you enjoyed this kind of thing. If you do like these kind of videos from me, definitely please comment, let me know, follow me on Twitter, follow all my stuff. I'll be streaming off and on. I cast a lot, you know, so I don't get to stream a lot because of that. But yeah, follow my stuff. Let me know on Twitter and YouTube what you think about this video, and I'll be doing more as more cards come out. So again, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next cast.